Okay. Okay, now I'm ready to start. Thank you all for your patience with me this morning. I guess it's just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's very confusing. So, now we're starting. Now that we've said everything, I can hear you and you all can hear me. Um, so what started, does anyone know what started this week? Started on Wednesday.
The season of Lent.
Yes. Yep. Yes. So Wednesday was the first day of Lent, right? So Ash Wednesday, which means that Tuesday was Fat Tuesday and Mardi Gras already happened, also happening. I don't quite know the relation. Um, so did anyone do anything for Ash Wednesday?
I virtually attended my husband's church service,
Oh yeah.
which meant I
Um,
only got virtual ashes, which were invisible. So
did that like smudge the camera a lot on the other end?
that would affect, but no, just meant that when Shannon got home, he had ashes on his forehead and I did not.
Okay, yes. So this week starts the Lent season of Lent. Lent is short for Lenten, which is also sometimes referred to as Lenten tide. So what has people's experience with Lent been in the past?
I've celebrated Lent some years I haven't, or I should maybe say recognized Lent. I fasted from different things. I think I've done like media fasts. I've done sweets fast because that's usually a struggle for me anyway. There are some years I ignore it completely. I do have a funny Ash Wednesday memory from when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I went to Catholic service with my family and I really wanted the ashes. And then as soon as they put the ashes on and talked about ashes to ashes, dust to dust, I lost my mind until they took it off. So yeah, but that's really it. Nothing particularly formal for me, but it has been something I've chosen to do over the years.
I used to like to give things up, not as a form of worship, but like as a challenge. And then it became like worship. Like every time that I had a craving for whatever I gave up, like one year, I think the first year I ever did it, I gave up meat. I've given up so much stuff. Social media, I gave up. I gave up speaking one year. I didn't speak for the entire Lent. And so every time I had a craving to do something, it was a reminder of like my relationship with God and remembering what Jesus went through and stuff like that. So it became kind of like a pilgrimage, but it was more fun to just see if I could do it at first.
I mean, like in junior high and high school, like I would give stuff up as well, giving up meat or giving up social media. I think in recent years, I got away from the challenge aspect and thought of, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I found it was helpful to like add things to my routine instead. Like adding, like maybe there's like a Lent, like Bible study type thing that I'm following along to, or there's just something that I'm trying to like add to my routine. But it doesn't really I don't think it ever has felt sustained like throughout the year. It's something that you do for the 40 days and then move on.
What would you like to share, Wade? Anything?
Nope.
Okay. Wasn't sure. Okay. Yes. So I've heard some really great things, right? So about taking, Molly mentioned sometimes we take up things, and a lot we have talked about that, sacrificing something for Lent or giving something up, right? Social media and sweets are really common. Alcohol. I think the talking is an interesting one. Um, so those are your experiences with Lent. What have you been taught about Lent? Like I heard some people mentioning like, oh, it's meant to like mimic Jesus or to draw close to God. But what has been taught about like, why does, going through some sort of fasting draw us closer? How does that help? How does that draw us closer to God? How does that reflect Jesus? What have you been taught about that?
I've been taught basically that in choosing to sacrifice something, it kind of mimics or imitates, it's a way to imitate Jesus and the fact that he chose to be a sacrifice for us. And so it is an act of worship. It is a form of worship to imitate him in such a way, to give up something small in comparison, and to remember that throughout the season leading up to Easter.
Not for Lent specifically, but for like just fasting in general. I've kind of always been taught that it's supposed to kind of focus your mind and your heart on God. And like Craig kind of touched on this too, but like when you have that, like if you're fasting from food, when you have that urge to eat, or if you're fasting from something else and you have that urge to do something, whatever it is you're fasting from, it kind of redirects your mind to God, so that instead of spending your time doing that thing, you're spending that time focusing on God.
Thank you. Okay.
That's the part I liked about it. It was the gentle reminder every time.
So part of my thoughts today is that, or where I'm hoping to go is that I've been okay, so I've been talking about community the past few weeks when I'm speaking, and I want to try and tie that to how we think about Lent. And first, a little bit of history. So, Lent has been around, probably since the early hundreds, definitely by the year 300, possibly beforehand. It's evolved over the years. At some point, they did, it was less days in a form of complete fasting. At some point, they ended up making it 40 days as the norm. We can come back to that number in a little bit. And originally there was at some point you didn't eat any meat, right? And that ended up kind of changing, and normally you give up meat nowadays, mostly just Fridays, right? And that's why you have the Friday fish fries at Catholic churches. I don't know, and right, again, that idea sort of sacrifice has been there, that Jesus sacrificed for us, so we should sacrifice to draw close to God. fasting in general has a long history of trying to say that, denying ourselves, food and drawing us closer to God, right? One does not live on bread alone. So yes, an idea it's also meant as a season of preparation for Easter. In Judaism, the number 40 often symbolizes like a change in era or epoch, however you want to view it. So this idea that you're preparing for a change. So something I've been thinking about the past few days with community and with Lent is that I talked last time about a little bit about Black liberation theology and this idea of, as Christians, are we meant to identify with, and we still had a lot of questions from last time I did this, which I'm not answering today, but feel free to bring them back up, that we are meant to identify with the oppressed, the dispossessed, the marginalized, right? We are called throughout the Bible to, shelter and feed and care for the widow and the orphan and the outcast, the alien. And when I'm thinking about Lent, often, this year I was thinking about giving something up. And like for me, like I've been really struggling with sweets recently. So part of me is like, maybe I should give up sweets. I ended up not giving up anything. I was like, nope, and part of me is like, giving up sweets is hard for me, which is part of why I ended up not doing it. I guess there's a level of irony in that. But I was thinking about like, what is this purpose of Lent? If it's meant to draw us closer to God and to Jesus, is like sweets can, giving up whatever I focus on, such as sweets or social media, can do that. But if we are meant, it seems very individualistic to me, right? We each have our personal sacrifice, our personal Lenten time. And we've been focusing on community a lot, and I've been coming back, and I would actually don't think I would mind Don doing a recap on this, the idea of soterios, right? Salvation and safety is found in community. And so when we're doing Lent, we're focusing on our individual relationship, which can be healthy. But it crossed my mind that I have never encountered Lent as really a community practice. All right. So has anyone else, have you seen, what have your experiences with community and Lent been? Has your community as a whole ever tried to give something up or taken something on?
I think in some churches it's a common practice during Lent or Advent to have maybe like an extra midweek service, and not really for fasting. In fact, it's often like dinner included, but maybe kind of an extra opportunity to reflect on the upcoming Easter celebration and or and Good Friday. And so I've seen like that as kind of a communal thing that the community takes on, kind of an extra practice during Lent. And I think some might combine that with an extra sacrifice in the form of like designating an offering during Lent to go towards something specific.
Great, Wade. Thank you. So yes.
For-
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah. For my experience, like I'm actually coming out of a tradition that is fairly like anti-Catholic. And so Lent has been something that like it's not like preached against. And like if I did it, it would be fine. But it's always kind of like been looked down on and like somewhat spoken against. And one of the things that had always frustrated me about it is like when I realized like how significant like the church calendar could be, like all Christians around the world, because it's not just Catholics that do Lent, kind of communing together in this like event, you know, at the same time, I feel like has a lot of significance. So I haven't I haven't ever done Lent. I plan to at some point, because I feel like the community aspect is really cool. So, but I haven't had that experience.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes. All right. And sometimes just doing things even our own way together can be really meaningful, right? If we're all going through Lent and doing our own different sacrifices or taking things up, we can still be supportive and with each other on that journey. And I don't mean to take away from that. I was thinking more along what Wade added. And yes, to be clear, like my experiences with Lent have been mostly through either the United Methodist Church or Southern Baptist. So definitely not something I limit to Catholicism. Yeah. I mean, to Roman Catholicism. I guess the other Catholicisms also practice it. So we talked about that as a community. Sometimes they'll add an extra service, which is, fairly regular. And I think, and I think they especially do that in Catholicism, and they've got a whole liturgical thing around it.
I just thought
And
something. I just remember, like, sorry. I just remember like growing up Catholic and going to Catholic school, and like Wade saying the addition of things and doing the Stations of the Cross, which was really like one of my favorite things about the Catholic Church. And similar to the idea of like talking about the church calendar and how it like unites us, but like there's just certain things about the ceremony of the Catholic Church that I miss not being part of it. Like, because I think there's like so many little, like because they honor the sacraments, it creates so many times of like celebration and focus on in the family on things like First Communion, celebrations, confirmation, and all that. And like, so that, and like the Stations of the Cross, which if you've never seen a Stations of the Cross, it's basically like readings and songs that walk along. It's somewhat like theatrical, but it's kind of like a call and response type of thing that walks through like the passion story. And it's just really impactful. And I've even thought in recent years when Lent comes around of like poking my head in a Catholic church just to sit through a Stations of the Cross, because I just thought it was a very meaningful ceremony or service that they do.
Yeah, Sarah, I think, sometimes returning to traditions that we grew up in, because there are things about those traditions that even though we may have left the tradition at some point, that doesn't mean that everything from that, is no longer of value. I know for years on Good Friday, I would go to a Lutheran Good Friday service, just because, as I said, no one does depressing like a Lutheran. So, but that was the tradition and the way that I grew up. But yeah, there were certain things around Lent or around specific holidays where it has additional acquired meaning, either from being done as a group communally that you all kind of have agreed on the meaning or agreed on the symbolism, or a personal meaning from your own past and growing up. And also what Paul was saying about, when you're from a tradition that doesn't like follow a liturgy or a lectionary or something like that, finding, there is that aspect, like when we base our messages, our weekly messages, on the Torah portion that Jews all around the world are reading and discussing the same thing, or in some Christian traditions, a lectionary, so there's lectionary years A, B, and C, and that just means that over the course of 3 years, the Christian churches using that lectionary are all going to be talking about the same passages on the same week. And that around the world, people are kind of engaged with God along a similar path as you that week. My dad's new church is doing a women's lectionary. And so this is a lectionary of readings that look at scriptures specifically from a woman's or womanist perspective. And but even that, because it's a published lectionary, there are other churches around the world that are going to be choosing that same lens, that week with them and going through that with them. So
Thanks. Thankfully my computer will tell me when I'm muted. So if I start talking and it notices, it'll be like, you're muted, so I can undo that. A little annoying when the background noise sets that off, but anyway. So thank you, Wade, for sharing. First, Wade and Sarah, yes. I have something to add to that towards the end about that, but for right now, I'm going to stick with where we're going. So something it's been crossing my mind, and I had started to prep this point before going off, right? So we've been talking about community, an idea of, and one week I talked about reflecting the image of God as a community, and part of why I ended up talking about Black liberation theology with the other week was that who do we identify with Christians? Do we identify with the oppressed and the marginalized, right? Those who are in prison, those who are I guess that's what I meant to do this week. Right, to, Jesus tells us to, and throughout the Bible, shelter and feed the orphan, the widow, the alien. And when I think about this time, when I've been thinking about Lent, are the things the church, whether individual or community, are the things we do for Lent working towards that goal? When I decide to give up sweets or social media, and I helping to, or if I take on extra, a Lenten Bible study, am I working towards reflecting the image of God and working towards, this reflecting the God of the oppressed, and working towards building a community where we are centering the marginalized and oppressed, where my work during Lent is preparing for that, right? We're coming up to Easter, still have, I think, about a month. And, what is the significance of, I'm not going to answer this question, what is the significance of the crucifixion when it comes to this? How does that reflect the image of God, the God of the oppressed, and how does that create a relationship then? And if Lent is the season to prepare for that, what I'm doing for Lent preparing me to help those God tells me to. So, again, is Lent, is the things I sacrifice and take up, is whether individually or as a community, is that helping us reflect the image of God? Is that helping us fulfill this mandate from God to identify with the marginalized, to feed the poor, to shelter the orphan and the widow, and to care for the alien? And so that's my big question for today. I'll type it in the chat so we can mull over it a bit. I'll give you some time. But Craig, you just jump right into your answer. Go for it.
I think it really depends on why you're doing it. There's like times when I was working in the food pantry and it just felt like I was doing it just for me. And that was cool and all. And I was helping and I was doing stuff, but I was doing it for me. So I would feel better. So if I sacrifice something, say, I'm not going to drink empty calories this month. Am I doing that to lose weight, or am I doing it as a sacrifice or in trying to connect with God and think about Christ when I do it? So if you're sacrificing for the right reason and you think about it, like I said, every time I wanted to do these things, I thought about, what Jesus did and what Jesus went through. Like that was where my mind went. And so in that, I think that my sacrifice was healthy in my relationship with God and what God wanted us to do, connect with God, and therefore go out and do what God wanted us to do. So it's not an easy answer, but it's something I experienced, because in all the times I ever sacrificed anything during Lent and grew closer, I grew further in my relationship and therefore was able to do what God wanted me to do, with what you're talking about, doing things in the community and helping people. It's why I am who I am right now. I wouldn't be that without the sacrifices I made and remembering and growing closer. So it's not a cut and dry answer, I think.
So to try and say that back to you to make sure I'm understanding, the things you do for Lent draw you closer to God sometimes, right? That when that's your purpose, and by drawing nearer to God, you identify and care more with those that God calls us to identify and care with. Okay.
Yeah, sorry it took me like 35 minutes to say it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to say it that succinctly if I hadn't heard you say it first. So to back up a step, since my question's a little heavy, do you think I'm right to be asking that, or is there any pushback? Like, how should we be approaching Lent? Is this something we should be keeping in mind?
I don't know. I think for me, just my understanding of Lent is so bound up in kind of traditional, like Lutheran Protestant Lenten practices that it, like it like my concept of Lent is so so much inward focused rather than outward focused, that that to talk about, is this the purpose of Lent, to make us better at carrying out the care and protection and providing safety for others. Like, for me, it's like I can see those both as good things, but it's hard for me to connect those together around this season, to say like, oh no, I don't think not that Lent is a time to take off from looking outward and looking to care for others and only look inward to oneself, but like if you were to, like, all of my understanding of Lent is bound up in kind of how I experienced it and was taught it, and your focus, so the focus is always on you or Christ's sacrifice, and so I think maybe that last part is the bridge for me to get out of that inward focus and to say, well, if part of, I think Danielle or someone had said it earlier, if part of the reason that we give things up or make sacrifices during Lent is to tie our sacrifice to Christ in some small way. And so in trying to say, well, how can I be more Christ-like? If God's work on the cross, if salvation is salve, is safety, then becoming more Christ-like, and especially more Christ-like in a Good Friday Easter sense, means looking for ways to provide what Christ's sacrifice did for us, to provide that salvation or safety for others. So there's the bridge for me, from the inward to the outward, in the reflection of Lent. But like I said, it's definitely something that for me, it's not natural to think of it this way, and to actually need some transition that connects the one to the other for me in my mind.
So wait, you just had a lot of great thoughts and I wasn't able to quite keep up with it, but I would love if you could write those down at some point. And if you want to teach in the upcoming weeks and as you work that out, you're more than welcome to. And then, but if not, then you don't have to. I know you're not a big teaching person. So any other thoughts? Or we all just still grinding this through our own mental wheelhouse and trying to figure out what we think?
I don't know how related this is. I just know it's what I'm thinking about and struggling with maybe a little bit right now. I love the idea of practicing Lent in community. I do think that's important. I think Paul mentioned earlier about doing things with the Christian community worldwide, being in concert with other Christians is really the goal. I think one of the goals, at least, of what we're doing. And then balancing that like with the individual sacrifice or commitment is also important. I mean, I think it's a both and thing. I don't think it's an either or. But then at the same time, I'm kind of thinking about how Lent is really a time of action in some way or another. Like we're sacrificing something, so, and like an act of withdrawal almost, or I think Molly said, we're adding something to our lives, hopefully as an act of worship. And I think where I'm struggling, which is where I started, is I'm really trying to find the action right now that makes sense for me, that what, how am I love in the world? How am I safety and security and salvation for others? And I think I've been personally frustrated lately because I feel like in all the things that I care about, the thing to do is to give money, which I don't mind giving money. I don't have a problem with that, but it's definitely, I'm like, I want to do more. I want to be actively involved in helping and doing without being savoury about it. I just, these are the things that I've really been mulling over and thinking about, and like, how can I act and be love in the world is really just something that's important to me. And I feel, I don't know, there's so many ways that more traditional churches do it and it's not quite right. But that was a way that I connected to some of those activities, volunteering, life is just overwhelming. Like just being a human feels hard and just managing all my own things. So, my work is service oriented. So a lot of times I feel like I'm like, well, look, I did my good deed. I was a good teacher today, but that's not really, I get paid to do that as well, whether I'm bad at it or good at it, I get paid to do it. And so I'm really just thinking about these things. So if anybody has any bright ideas, answers, send them this way.
No, I think those are beautiful thoughts, Danielle. Here I am asking these questions, and something that did not cross my mind is that a beautiful part about Lent is that we are taking our faith and embodying it. We're turning into action, right? And so often faith is about what we feel and what we believe. And I feel like a lot of times it's not often enough about what we do. And just to say that, oh, that's like, a key part about Lent is just like, everyone's just like, oof, like, oh, totally skipped that part. So yeah, thank you for that very much.
Well, and I am personally very prone to getting stuck in my head with my beautiful thoughts and reflecting and introspecting. And like, people don't feel that. They don't necessarily, yes, we do to a degree, but like, that's not actually making a difference necessarily for me just to think these lovely thoughts about God. So I definitely just want to make sure that like I'm balancing, spiritual activity on the inside with some actual
I
work.
disagree. I think your thoughts become action.
Sometimes, yes, but not always. I think a lot of thoughts.
Well, all right, as long as you don't murder any children, and you're teaching. But I think for the most part, I think you thinking that's what I was trying to go for at the beginning when I started doing Lent, is I want to grow I want to strengthen my relationship. And I think as long as you do that and you have these thoughts and you do the strengthening, that will result in action. And it has for me, and I'm sure it has for, I don't know Paul yet, but all of you. But I hope Paul too, maybe.
Crick's mostly talking about the good thoughts, right? So, yeah. All my students come away from unharmed at the end of the day.
Don't murder children.
I am also a teacher, and I teach high school. And we
What
have
subject?
I teach music, so band orchestra,
Which school district?
TPS. So
Okay, now
um,
you can keep going. I'm gonna stop.
and we have, this is unrelated to the discussion, but related to Craig telling us not to murder children. We have like scissors in our little like office because we have this space for us to fix instruments, and so kids.
Do we need to stop the recording now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe, but we have like sets of scissors, so kids will come in and sometimes there's only one available, and there's this specific pair that we call the murder scissors, and every time we refer to it as the murder scissors, we always have this moment of, we probably shouldn't call it that. But we do. That's my story. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh man, you're a great community. Okay, well, that was my main question. Kind of a biggie. And I don't have much else. So like, if you all okay, like, is there any lingering thoughts that anyone would like to share?
Well, I guess, something Danielle said about, I'm a teacher. I'm naturally in a helping and serving profession, but I'm paid, and I get paid whether I'm a good teacher or a bad teacher. And so I'm the son of two teachers, and and I definitely know that teaching is a job, but I also know that there are ways you can teach, and ways you interact with your students that provides safety and salvation, provides an escape, provides just a few hours of not having to think about something else. Whether it's a home life, whether it's or even for some people, for some kids, school is the is the bad place. But if they have one good teacher there, who recognizes that, so like, I don't want to fall into the all teachers are saintly, and I also don't want to fall into the, well, you're like, you need to bring your religion into your workplace, and this is how you evangelize all of your coworkers. And it's like no, like, this is how you be a decent human being who is noticing who needs the extra care or safety or just an ear, and just having someone there at school that understands can be very can be a very powerful way to provide safety. And from my experience talking to my friends who I went to school with, like, you will probably never know. I don't think I don't think it's often that we're able to go, or that we feel socially able to go back and tell our teachers that, but I'm what, 51 now, and I am Facebook friends with a couple of my teachers from junior high and high school because they were that safety for me, and I sought them out later, and found them on Facebook, and and so but I don't know that I've ever told them, or I don't even know that I know specific ways that they were. It's just that they treated me like I was a person and who could be given responsibilities, who could be laughed and joked with and that sort of thing. So anyway, I just, what you said about, like it doesn't need to be a volunteer thing. It could be that you are a teacher exactly because that's how it is easiest for you to provide that environment of safety for someone. So.
Yeah, it's definitely something I roll around with in my head. I feel like it's not enough, but I know that that's not always accurate either, that feeling that I need to do more and do the things and be more. But I do appreciate everybody's thoughts on that. Just trying to work it out, how to be a good human.
Yeah.
Okay, as I already said, that's all I had. So thank you, Wade, for those closing thoughts. So, no, I'm not. Stop it. Just because I'm stroking my hair doesn't mean I'm freaking out. Yeah, so if that's all, I guess we'll stop the 12 seconds. I'll keep this on the recording. So we had talked a little bit about liturgy in the beginning, and just idea of having a calendar, right? We've often followed the Jewish Torah calendar. Some churches have lecterns. Some of you might have heard of this. It's kind of a part of the oral Torah. It's called the Ethics of Our Fathers. Is it Our Fathers or the Fathers? Our Fathers. Okay. Put it in the chat. In the Hebrew, it's Pirkei Avot. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. And traditionally, there is some tradition that it is read. So this consists of 6 chapters, and they are read between Passover and Shavuot. So something I was thinking of doing after Easter, after Passover, is going through these chapters for the next 6 weeks. And I was wondering what other people in the community thought about that, like yay, nay, mediocre. So just throwing that out there for now. If you want to do your own research and Google it, try and figure out if there's something you're interested in doing, and get back to me. It is, and I'll try to remember to say this for the next couple weeks and try and get a sense of how people would feel about doing that. Yeah. Okay, so that was my announcements. We can stop the recording.